All right. You guys hear me? All right, thanks a lot for coming. This talk is about CounterSploit, which is a tool for using Metasploit for defenders. I got a lot to say, so I'm probably going to talk pretty fast. And so yeah. So hi, I'm John Seely. I've been doing InfoSec for about 10 years. Definitely don't have all the answers, for sure, but I hope this talk is not a waste of your time. I really like this picture. If you can't really tell what's going on, there's a security gate on that road there, and the snow has kind of helped us see that users aren't exactly doing what they're supposed to do. So I just love this because you can talk InfoSec to that a lot of different ways. But anyway. So let's talk about attackers today, right? Highly successful. They're all over the place. They're kind of sneaky. And they've got a lot of different ways to do what they want to do. And if they don't have vulns that they need to use, they can just kind of ask your users to click things, and your users will. So that sucks. One of the reasons I think they're doing so well is that there are just a ton of tools and techniques for attackers to use, right? Not just Metasploit, but a variety of other things that really enable attackers to do a lot of things without necessarily a lot of technical skill or a lot of focus. So this lets a lot of people into the attack game who maybe couldn't do it before. And for the people who do have the skills to attack, you know, they get to focus their time and effort on things other than just getting the exploit to run and getting a shell. They get to get more time to be sneaky and do a lot of things. Also, command and control is getting really nifty in the last few years. You know, back in the day, you used to be able to watch for SSH outbound or IRC outbound. Nowadays, not so much. You know, 80 and 443 are always open out, and even if you're full proxying, you know, there's command and control channels over Facebook and over Twitter. This stuff's really hard to see. So, and further, you know, I mean, conferences like this and others, there's just so much research in the attack space, right? Every, you know, day or week, there's new exploits, new attacks, new techniques. So, attackers are doing really, really good, and there's a ton of them, right? Like tons of different actors. You know, amateur hour out to complete professionals. Lots of different motivations, so you can't always watch for one kind of thing or expect that they're going to come get you in one kind of way. So yeah, I think they're pretty strong, pretty successful. On the other hand, you have defenders. Defenders are not doing so good, in my opinion. And there's a lot of different reasons for that. Last year at Derby, you heard a lot of PCI sucks and things like that. But you know, no matter what you say, you're kind of like these guys laying in the hallway and Darth is walking down like a pwned. And the thing that sucks about it too is that you generally have no idea that they've just walked all over you. So why is this, right? Most of the shops that I've seen, defenders are really understaffed, and they work in fragmented roles, right? So one guy's looking at one tool, another guy's looking at another tool. Even if they're sitting in the same SOC together, they're not necessarily communicating. They maybe have a lot of different job focus, you know, and they're really out of touch with their networks in general, I think, right? A lot of places, if you went and you asked them, hey, what's a normal day look like on your network? What's your normal outbound traffic look like? No idea. You show them a TCP dump, is there anything bad in here? I don't know. You show them a box, is this box compromised or not? I don't know. Part of the reason I think this work is happening is because defensive toolkits just aren't getting it done. In the forensics space, most tools are really focused towards taking things to court. But virtually everything that you see when you're defending a network in a corporate environment or something like that is not going to go, right? Your mass malware is never going to court. Your state actor is never going to court. But that's what your tools are trying to make you do. And also with the number of alerts that are generated, you can't spend the amount of time that these tools need you to spend, right? Drop ship me some drives, I'll get them in a couple days, and I'll spend 8 hours, you know, indexing substrings in Slack space or something like that. You know, it's just, you can't do that. You won't get anywhere. And I think that motivates people not to really check things because it takes so much effort. Also, tools are generally really expensive, not just in dollars, even though they are expensive in dollars, but in the cycles to run them, to set them up, and do things with them. So ultimately, yeah, and so where it goes is like even with people like us, you know, InfoSec folks and everything else, you know, I think I know one guy who I would say there's probably nobody on his network because he's so neurotic and paranoid and does so much stuff. But all my friends, guys who are really, really smart, you know, I talk to them about what they do, and they're not doing, and me too, right? We are not doing the things that we will tell our employer you have to do, right? We get home, we're tired, you don't want to rebuild this box or do all this stuff. So do you know what's really exiting your network? Are you watching what's happening on your wireless? You know, most people aren't. So at the end of the day, if you've got, you know, two or three machines that are actively being used by users, going to the internet and everything else, it's really, really hard to look at those boxes and say, there's nothing wrong with them, right? You make that 3,000 boxes or 30,000 boxes, it's just not working. So I kind of got to thinking about the differences between attack and defense nowadays and saying, what can we do to change this? Is there a way that we could shift it? If you agree that attackers are really doing a lot better than defenders, why is that and what can we do? And something I got to thinking was, well, maybe if defenders acted more like attackers, maybe if maybe attackers are doing so well because their tools are really working for them and their methodologies are really working for them. So maybe we can just try to be more like them, whatever that means, and have some success. Because defense in depth is the way, it's a great theory, but as the way it's implemented all over, it's not really getting it done. So, can we use Metasploit for defense? Kind of said, well, why not? It's a great foundation to build on. It does a lot of things. It's solved a ton of problems already that you don't have to worry about. You can extend it to do just about anything, right? And it's stealthy, which is kind of new for the defense space, right? We've always got like agents and you can see exactly what's going on. So if you're going to go down that path, kind of got to think that maybe we should change our tactics and try to be more attack-like, Rather than sitting back in our ivory tower and waiting for some red light to blink and say, ha-ha, the bad guys are here. Maybe what you should be doing is going out and getting on some machines and looking around and saying, what's normal? What's going on here? I've got an alert. I'm just going to go spend some time looking at this box. When you're doing that, maybe you should be more independent. Maybe there should be less teamwork, right? Don't put in a ticket to have some guy look at this file, right? He's going to screw it up and submit it to virus total and whatever anyway. Thanks, brother. I do need that. Please.
Proceed.
So maybe be more independent and go out and see what you can do. As a defender, you have some degree of access into your environment today, right? You're an admin, maybe you're a domain admin, right? You can go out and get on boxes and do stuff, whether or not they're really asking you to. And even if you don't have access, you know your environment more than anybody else does, as hopefully you do. So maybe you know the local admin password. Maybe you know that we're not patching for Flash and for Java, right? You can throw shells on these boxes whether or not you're really supposed to. So your mileage may vary, and we don't want any resume generating events, but forgiveness, not permission? I don't know. So I put together this tool called CounterSploit. It's basically an incident response and investigation-focused tool. It's supposed to do live response, right? So that's getting on machines in a running state, not necessarily worrying too much about keeping things forensically sound, and being able to kind of try to rapidly triage and assess, has anything happened to this machine? Is anything wrong with it, right? And not just one machine, but groups of machines, because there's lots of alerts. Hopefully it's pretty flexible. It's supposed to be kind of like a Swiss Army knife. There's lots of things in it. You're not going to use them all the time, but and if there's things that aren't in it, it should be relatively easily to bolt in new stuff, right? The tool does nothing with analytics. It does not try to find evil for you at all, right? Basically, it just gathers data. It can gather a lot. It dumps it all back in CSV. So I recommend that you write some scripts and do some things to do post-processing of that data and try to figure out what you're seeing. Part of the reason we don't do analytics is it's really hard to program them. But our brains are really good at that stuff, right? You can see a pattern really easily, whereas writing code to see that pattern is tough. You can also, sorry, I kind of lost my train of thought there, but so basically the idea is to just let your brain, you as the operator, do what you're good at, and then let the code do what it's good at, which is just chunking through and finding things. The closest that we do to analytics in the tool is whitelisting, right? I think blacklisting is just full of fail. We've got a lot of history with antivirus to tell us that that's true. So when you talk whitelisting, a lot of people will be like, oh, that's a really tough problem. There's too much stuff. We can't figure out everything that's good. And I think if you're trying to figure out everything that's good everywhere, that might be true, right? But in your environment, it's probably relatively homogeneous, right? You've got a limited number of distributions. Those distros have limited numbers of executables, DLLs, and everything else, even when you talk third party and everything. So I'm not saying that you should be able to whitelist everything, but the idea is there's a lot of known good stuff in your environment you don't necessarily need to pay attention to. So we try to use whitelisting to tone that down and keep it away from the operator so they can focus on the unknown. The tool is Windows focused. It runs on XP and 7. Your mileage may vary on other distros, but it should basically work. and it could get tweaked out, but I started with XP and 7. There's no reason we couldn't port this concept to Unix, Linux, Mac, whatever, or phones is a place I think this could be really interesting. But right now the attack surface, is so much in Windows that that's where we start. So development, you can't really see this terrible diagram very well, but Countersploit is based on interpreter or Metasploit scripts, right? So your primary file is countersploit.rb. That's in your interpreter scripts directory, and it basically just handles object instantiation, menuing, and parsing through command line input that the operator is trying to do. Everything else is in your in your holder and your .msf4 folder. And in your Countersploit directory, you've got a couple different folders. You've got a lib folder, which is basically the objects that do all the heavy lifting. There's an audit lib. That basically handles all the auditing tasks and then tracking things that we need to track when we're doing work. And then you've got an FS lib and system lib that's just dividing the tasks in the file system versus general system things. You've got an audit directory. This is where all your CSV data gets dumped. You've got a bin directory. This is for third-party executables that we're going to upload to target machines. You've got a C2 directory for the commands that you want to send out. So there's a general command file. If you put commands in there, it runs on all the hosts you have shells on, and then you have individual ones per host. So you could set something up where, I want to run this all the time, but these boxes are interesting and I need to do this, this, and this. There's also an etc directory where our whitelist file is, and at some point in time, maybe I'll take the variables out of countersploit.rb and put them in a conf file, maybe. So I don't know if doing it on scripts was the right way to do it. I don't know a lot about Metasploit development. But what seemed cool about scripts was you can run them on multiple sessions really, really easily. And also it seems like that scripts are relatively loosely coupled from changes within Metasploit, right? Like, I don't know what's going to change on the internals of Metasploit tomorrow, but I assume that get system is still going to be there, and a lot of other things. So whether or not that's true, I don't know, but it seemed like the right way to do it. So when I was building out solutions for how to do things within Countersploit, the basic methodology was to say, what can I do natively within MSF, right? I want to do that first, right? And you can do a lot. If you can't do it natively within MSF, then maybe we can do it with Railgun, right? And if we can't do it with Railgun, let's fall back on third-party utilities that we want to use. Between those three things, I didn't find anything that couldn't be done. So I think there probably are things that can't be done, but you can do it. This was my Teach Myself Ruby project, so try not to laugh at it, but I will say that the Metasploit code is really, really clean. It's really a blast to look through, really easy to understand what's in there. If you're interested in this stuff, I really recommend that you just dig in and start looking around. So here's the capabilities of Countersploit in a nutshell. We do auditing, right? If we're going to be defensive operators and we're going to be showing that on boxes, we want to know what people are doing so that it's not getting abused. So we log all the actions that the operator takes, and then we store all the results from everything you do in CSV. The tool allows for command and control, like I was talking about. You can queue up commands. You can run commands on single and multiple hosts. We do file hashing in MD5 just because file downloads that auto hash and everything else. There's a system info command that's a little different than sysinfo. We read startup execution via WMIC. Do file system list, process list, service list, driver list. All those automatically, or if you pass it the right param, will hash the files. And then if you do that on service lists, if you've got a service host service, it goes and finds the DLL that's running that service and hashes it too. Anytime you're doing MD5ing within the tool, you can also pass a -W command for your whitelist. And what happens there is if it sees an MD5 that's on your whitelist file, that information is not returned to you as the operator. The idea there, like I said before, is just to trim down what you have to look at and focus on, so that if you're looking at drivers on a host, on a vanilla Windows box, there's like 90 plus drivers in it. You run that with a whitelist, maybe you're down to 2 or 3. System logs. I don't know if anybody here has looked at the event log reader within Metasploit. If you have, you might have been a little underwhelmed. The data that comes back is not at all the same as when you read the log on the actual box. And I was really surprised because so much Metasploit stuff is really good, right? So I was like, well, gee, I guess I just have to go write my own event log parser to do this right. And I spent about 2 minutes looking at that, and I barfed all over the place because Microsoft is really terrible. It's ridiculous the things that you need to do to read the event log. So I did that through WMIC and just let Windows do the heavy lifting for me. There's a lot of WMIC stuff in here. And then we do a log tail, right? So, which will basically just say, hey, show me only the logs that are new since the last time I looked at the log on this box. One kind of sideways idea here, right, is maybe you're in an environment where you don't have syslog agents, but you want to be able to read logs on hundreds of boxes or tens of boxes or whatever it is, right? Well, if you can't get agents pushed out and a syslog infrastructure made and everything else, why not just do it in memory, right? Go shell out on these boxes that you're interested in right now and pull that log data back yourself in CSV and parse it, right? There's no reason that you have to do that. So yeah, we can look at scheduled jobs, network information, kind of the same deal on the network information too, right? We pull back a lot of different kind of information, but say like a netstat listing, right? All your recent connections on this host. Maybe you think something funky is going on in a subnet, but you don't really know what it is. Well, why not just run netstats on these boxes every couple of minutes, right? And pull all that data back, and then in the back end, you can just start parsing out the RFC 1918 stuff that's known good for your environment, and be left with these connections that are going out. Maybe you can catch some beacons, some command and control beacons, or who knows. Alternate data stream listing, process memory capture. We do that a little different than Carlos did. You'll see that in a second. Registry capture we do through Windows. Restore point enumeration, so you can kind of dig into restore points, see what files are there, when they were made. And then host isolation and host web diversion. With isolation, the general idea is you're gonna, maybe you've got a box that you're suspicious of and you don't want it talking to other machines on your network. We do a couple things to be able to tamp it down while still being able to investigate and talk to it. And web diversion, I'll talk about it a little more in the demo, but basically the idea is, can I redirect traffic from a host to me without that host knowing it so that I can see what's going on? So drawbacks, there are definitely some. This is version 1.0, so as with everything like that, there are problems. One of the complaints is sometimes it's slow, right? If you're doing a file system listing on docs and settings on a box that's been running for 4 years and has tons of temp files and cookies, it's going to take a second. If you go run through C/Windows and stat and MD5 everything, go to lunch and come back. Right now we're doing everything through the Windows API. There's no raw access in the tool at the moment, but there's no reason you couldn't, right? There's plenty of tools out there that will do raw mem dumps and raw disk access. You can integrate those into the tool. Part of the reason I didn't, there's some licensing issues with some, but there are definitely things that are free for personal use that maybe we'll put in there in a minute. There's some bugs. You'll see one in the demo or demos. Another drawback, it's not quite as extensible and plug-inable as I'd like it to be. It'd be really cool if you could just kind of write up a new capability and drop it in a folder and then magically everything works. The way I coded it up, that doesn't really happen. You have to get into CounterSploit RB, make sure that you've got menuing for whatever capability you've got, make sure you're instantiating it and everything else. So, we're not forensically sound either. That wasn't really a goal, but we'd like to be if we could. But if you're uploading third-party binaries, obviously you're not right there. Also, WMIC, for some reason, I couldn't channelize the output from standard out, either running it from WMIC or from command. I have no idea why. If you know, let me know. And then the tool is also single-threaded, right? So if you're running a bunch of commands and it takes 30 minutes to run on one host, before it starts running on the next host that you're looking at, you just got to wait. So I probably need to go look at Armitage and figure out how to do some multi-threading. Yeah, and the other one that you'll see if you use the tool is that at the time I was doing it, it seemed like when you're passing command lines through the command line argument parser from Metasploit, it doesn't really like spaces. So if you're doing something on a path with spacing, you use DOS-style path names like docu, miss, wiggly1, things like that. So. And on to video demos. So here, just a quick demo of multi-host execution. I've got shells on a Windows XP machine and a Windows 7 machine. In here, we've got the CounterSploit directory. Inside C2, there's the general command file. It's basically saying run system info. So we run CounterSploit from sessions. It runs on both hosts. Basically, what it's doing right there, way too fast for you to see, is that it tries to get system if it can. It migrates to a PID of your choice, so you can say, let's go to winlogon or whatever you want to go to. Runs the command, logs everything, moves to the next host. Sorry, these videos are really fast. It's good because I'm out of time, but they're a little too fast to see. So a quick demo of the whitelisting. So now you can see there's command files for each individual host in there. I took out the sysinfo command. Thanks, boss. So now what we're doing is running a process list. You can see your running processes with the MD5s, those files on disk, over to the right. And then if I run it with the whitelisting command, you can see that only 2 things came back. That's Java stuff that wasn't in my whitelist. All right, same thing with services. So here what we're doing is parsing out running services, tracking down, if it's a service host or whatever, finding the DLL, hashing it all up. This part of the video is kind of wonky, so it's a little hard to see. You guys can see that at all anyway. But so you get like 50 rows of data returned, So then you go ahead and run that back with the -w for your whitelist. And just to give you an idea, you'll see it later, but this is running at about 2 times speed. So, you'll sit around for a minute while this works. Right, and so the data we get back is only 5 services. Right, that's a lot easier to go through than the 50 you started with. Again, you got to be careful about what you whitelist. If you whitelist something bad, you're going to have a bad day. Right, and that's why I don't do whitelisting all the time, because maybe you don't want to use it. File system stuff. So when we do file system searches, what we'll do here is we'll parse through CDocs and settings administrator. We'll stat all the files, MD5 the files, and then search for files created between August 23rd and August 25th. It kind of chunks through. This is one of those things, like I said before, it can be a little slow. All right, so we've got burp suite, some other things. Then I'll go ahead and run a alternate data stream listing. This is a third-party binary. So it just pushes the binary up to the host, runs it. Burp suite was downloaded from the internet, so it's got an ADS. Some other things had an ADS. And then when it gets done, it rips out the file you uploaded. I got 2 more of these. This one just shows a couple random things. Network listing. It just dumps a lot of info. And like I say, all this data is formatted to be viewed when it's being showed on the screen, but then on the back end it's just straight CSV. So do a process mem dump. With the flags, I ran it there. It's basically going to process dump all the images. So like if you load Notepad, it also loads a bunch of DLLs. So we're pulling each of the image DLLs out, and so these are out of memory, right, as opposed to on disk. I think it might be cool, not really with this module, but doing it, looking at this might be an interesting way to find interpreter shells. If you've done DLL or injection to other processes, if you know what's supposed to be right, maybe you can, but I don't know. I didn't really try to do that. It's just a thought. I don't know what I'm doing here. Love. Thanks. It's even smaller on my screen. So there's the event log stuff that pulls out, and then what I'm going to do is go back and restart a couple services to generate some new log events. And then I go run logtail. Since we're doing it through WMIC as opposed to a real syslog agent, right, you have to read the entire log again. So you're not gaining anything in speed, but as far as what you see, oh yeah, there's a bug, right? It couldn't delete a file, and so it bombs. I should fix that. You should just run it again. But yeah, so since it has to go through everything again and then look at where was the last place it left off, you can see now you only have a couple events. And real quick, we'll do a restore point list. And so this box had a bunch of restore points, so it chunks through, it tells you when the restore point was created, if there were files associated, it finds those, hashes them, etc. All right, last we've got isolation and monitoring. So on the right-hand side here at the top, we're running pings out to our Metasploit box, right? And on the bottom is we're pinging out to another box on the network. So you can see how fast this is running, how fast those pings are going. So what we're going to do first is we're going to isolate the host on layer 2. So we do that by ARP poisoning all the IPs except for our own channel. And what you'll see is as this runs through, pings start dropping to the other host down at the bottom, but your Metasploit stuff is maintained, right? Then we'll do it again through DNS. So we'll go to the host, we'll read its DNS servers, and then we arc poison those and create null routes or pseudo null routes. And I didn't show layer 3 on this one, but then if you run it with the -x, it removes everything. You can see the host is back to pinging. It's back to the way that it was. So monitoring, what we're doing here is basically pushing a modified version of PuTTY out to the host, right? And setting up an SSH channel back to us or back to a proxy or whatever we wanted to do, right? We push out domains to the host file. Maybe you've got evil.com, you think it's doing some command and control, you want to see what's happening. So we modify the host file, we set up the SSH tunnel. You can see we've changed the host file there. Do a quick netstat, you can see that the SSH tunnel is up. So I run a quick netcat listener, go to a browser, go to www.evil.com, and you can see it pops through on your netcat down there. Right? So potentially you could look at command and control or things like that that are happening. I don't think it's really useful in this form, and that's not the way I'd like to do it. I was really looking for and again, if you run with -x, it pulls everything out, host files back to normal, files deleted, process is killed. What I really wanted to do with that was to run it with a dynamic proxifier, right? So that what you're going to do is you're going to hook the OS so that every network connection that the OS makes ends up getting pushed down SOCKS proxy, right? So you don't need to know what a box is talking to. All its traffic is just coming to you so that you can monitor it, muck with it, or whatever. I wasn't able to do that because of finding, a proxifier that didn't require a reboot, could be configured on the command line, and then also had the appropriate licensing. I wasn't able to find something, but if you know of something, feel free to let me know. So I don't think I have a lot of time left. Any quick questions? No? If you want to talk about this stuff more, I'll hang out in the speaker room. And closing thoughts, this was a Cyber Fast Track project. I want to say that CFT was definitely awesome. We got a couple of bits guys here. They're awesome. So big ups to everyone who does Metasploit development. Such a cool project. Thanks to DerbyCon. Check out Nickerson's talk from last year if you haven't seen it. Lots of great information in there, lots of wisdom. And then when I did this, I told my buddy, I was like, I'm going to do Metasploit for defense. And he was like, somebody already did that. So that was Marcus Carey. So good for him for getting there first. And love Stack Overflow, so much good stuff. If you want to check it out, it's up on the internet now. So you can go to codegoogle.com/p/countersploit. If you want to shoot me an email, rstproservice@gmail.com. That's all I've got. Thank you very much.